In the last video, we successfully saved our DDG profile record up into CloudKit. In this video, we're going to pull that down and populate our profile screen. Okay, back in Xcode, like I said, this code is going to be a mess. We're going to fix it in the next video, but here we have our create profile function, and a lot of these CloudKit calls. Well, retrieving it is fairly similar. We got to do some of the same steps. Before we talk about that, I want to talk about while you're developing, sometimes your app can be in a weird state. And that's what we're going to be. Because right now, as you saw with my mistakes in the last video, you can create multiple profiles, right? Just mash the create button and you'll create a bunch of profiles. We will fix that, of course. For right now, though, we don't have that in place. So to prevent us from doing anything bad like that, I'm going to go up to the button here, comment out, create profile. And then let's go ahead and take bets right now that I will forget I did that when it comes time to actually do it. And I will run it. It won't work. And I will have forgotten I've done that. $100, that's going to happen. All right, go down below create profile. We're going to create a new function, func get profile. And again, just to reiterate, messy code, going straight down the happy path, not worrying about handling errors, getting it working, then we come back and clean up. Okay, so just like last time, let's comment out our steps. So big picture, I need to pull down the data from the profile. Well, how do I get to the profile? Because I don't really know the profile record ID. If I had the profile record ID, I could just download it like that and we're good. Well, we have to get that. Okay, so the way to get that is to get our user record because our user record has a reference to that record ID. Great. Well, in order to get our user record, we first need to get our user ID to get our user record. Remember, just like we did when we saved it. A lot of steps. And again, part of the benefit of like spelling it out step by step and implementing it step by step is you're going to see real quick what data you're going to need over and over again. So you'll know like, okay, I should probably store this data somewhere. That way I don't have to keep retrieving it. Something like the user record or the profile ID. So we will handle that. But again, spelling it out makes it painfully obvious what you need to refactor, what data you should store. So that's why I like doing it this way. Again, the first time I'm trying to get something working. So the first step is to get our user record. And again, remember that was a two-step process. So we're going to go right back up to create profile. And it starts here with, I'll do it one by one just not to be too confusing. So we'll copy fetch user record ID because that's the first step. I will paste it here and you'll notice I didn't quite paste that last curly brace because there's a whole bunch of other stuff in there. So I have to add that here. Okay, cool. So that's step one, get our user record ID. Again, the refactoring should be painfully obvious. Here's where we're going to get user record, again, inside here. So now once we have the record ID, let's get user record with that record ID. Cool. So now in here, and again, I didn't have that last curly brace from the copy paste, so be careful about that. So now that we have our user record, now we need to grab the reference from that. So we can say let profile reference equal user record. And just like before, right, we accessed it, kind of via dictionary. This was called user profile. And anytime you're pulling it out there, you have to cast it, right? So we'll say as ck record dot reference, right? It is a reference. Again, we're force unwrapping because we're just going straight down the happy path, not worrying about errors. We will come back and properly do all this. I know I've said that 1,000 times, but I just want to be very clear about the process of what we're doing. So now we have our profile reference, and our reference has a record ID. So we'll say, say let record ID equal profile reference dot, you can see we get a record ID. So it's a record ID of our profile. And that's what we need to fetch the profile. Again, you're going to see data that you should probably persist because you're going to use it multiple times. So we'll actually be a little more clear and call this profile record ID. Do Command B to make sure everything's good. Okay, cool. We're just not using it yet. Oh, we will Xcode. So now that we have our record ID that points to the profile we want, now we need to fetch it based on that ID. So that is container.default.public cloud database, because that's where we're going, and then fetch. Just like we fetched our user record, it's the same call. We're just passing in a different record ID. Before we were passing in our user record ID, now we're passing in the profile record ID. So again, see it takes in a CK record ID. Well, we have our profile record ID up here. So we'll copy, paste it there, and then the completion handler, hit return, and we're going to get back a CK record, which will be our profile. So say profile record, again, just to be very clear of what it is, error. And then just like before, I'm going to copy and paste this guardlet because we are just trying to make this work. We'll say profile record equals profile record. And then of course, if we have an error, print it out. But now down here on this line, clean up my curly braces before they get out of control. But by now, I have my profile record. So now that I have my profile record, I just need to update my UI with that information. Well, if you notice, we're like 3 layers deep into network calls here. Again, craziness, I get it. But we are on a background thread, so we do need to go to the main thread before we update our UI. So that's first things first before we forget. So dispatch queue.main.async, and here's where we will update our UI. Now I'm going to take one little extra step here to make this code a little cleaner. I'm going to say let profile equal DDG profile. We can create this from a record, and we have our profile record. So I'm basically converting it to our DDG profile object so I can use that to populate the UI. Reason being, if we go back to our DDG profile, which we're going to have to add a little something extra to, if we go to model, DDG profile, like look at all the stuff I have to do when I'm trying to access it directly from the record, right? I have to pass in the key, then I gotta, cast it to the type and then give it a default value. Well, we've already done that here. So by converting it to a profile, it's just going to be much cleaner at the call site. Okay, we'll come back here in a second because there's something we got to do with the CK asset, very similar to what we did on DDG location, right? Remember how we didn't have the nil case for a DDG location when we tried to use it in our UI, and in case CK asset came back as nil? Very, very similar thing. So we'll create a function very similar to this on the DDG profile, but we'll come back to that here in just a second. So what I want to do now that I have my profile, is up at the top, right? First name, last name, company bio, all the stuff in my UI. Let's set that equal to, all the information. So what I want to do is first name equals profile dot first name. Last name equals profile dot last name. Company name equals profile dot company name. Bio equals profile dot bio. And then here's the trick, right? Avatar equals, because up here, right, avatar is a UI image. And here we have a CK asset on our profile, right? If I just do profile.avatar, you see it's of type CK asset. Well, that's not an image. Well, we've done this before where we convert a CK asset to a UI image in .square. You may think that is fine. That's what you should do. However, this doesn't handle the case if something happened on our user record and the avatar CK asset is nil. If that is the case, when we hit this .avatar, it will crash because it's nil. So we're not handling the nil case. Again, very similar to what we did with our DDG locations. So what I want to do, in fact, I'm going to go to the DDG location, copy this function here. And remember the lesson here, like, yes, these are similar functions. Yes, you could probably write these with generics. Yes, you could refactor it. But again, I'm intentionally repeating myself and being okay with it because I feel like it makes my call sites a lot cleaner and the code easier to understand. But again, that's just my opinion, my style. It's perfectly fine if you disagree with that and you prefer to create it as a generic. We talked about that before, but I wanted to reiterate that that dry, don't repeat yourself, is not at all costs, right? To me, my call sites and ease of use in the code is more important than being perfectly dry. All right, so DDG profile, let's paste this here, except I'm not gonna say create square image. I'm gonna say create avatar image. Guess I could have left that there. And then instead of asset, it is avatar. I'll move this up a little bit. Equals avatar, right? Because it's named avatar here. That's our CK asset. So if CK asset is nil, can't find UI image and scope because I don't have UI kit. There we go. So what's happening here? Hey, make sure I have a value at avatar. Make sure it's not nil. If it is nil, we're going to return our placeholder image, not .square, .avatar, right? We want that avatar placeholder image. So here now I will do avatar, which is a CK asset. We'll convert that to a UI image in the square dimension. That's what we want. So now back to profile view, instead of trying to convert my CK asset into an image right here, we will delete the avatar thing altogether and do create avatar image. Again, cleaner at the call site. It is a little unsafe at the moment, meaning somebody could come into your code base that's never used it before, or maybe you forget 6 months down the line and you go to try to, do something like this again. And it may make sense to be like, oh, hey, my CK assets have a convert to UI image in Square. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And they may not understand the whole concept of like how you handled it. So there is a way to make this a little safer, which we will do in the refactor video, but you should always be conscious of things like that, of like what has access to call that, right? And sometimes it's not possible to make everything completely safe, but it is something you always should be thinking about and striving to do your best at, to basically limit things with private, file private, so only certain things have access to this. Okay, so you know what I got to do? Line up the equal signs because that drives me nuts. Cool. Clean up the spacing. That's another thing I see all the time in like code bases is like, you know, even on like pull requests that I've had to review, like I'll see like crazy spacing like that. And I'm like, come on, take the extra 2 seconds, you know, clean up your workspace here, right? A little pet peeve of mine. I see that all the time. Okay, so let's do a quick walkthrough before we test here. Well, we got to make sure we call this. Again, I'm going to do that before I explain it because I will forget. So we got to call get profile. For now, we're going to do it in on appear. So below our toolbar here, we'll do on appear. And the closure, and this can just be a one-liner. We'll say get profile. Okay, now back to the walkthrough. Okay, that was create profile. Code's a mess. I told you. I warned you. Okay, so first things first, we got to get our user record because our user record is what ties us to our profile. Okay, get the record ID. Cool. Use that record ID to get the user record. Cool. Now that we have the user record, yank out the reference, which has a record ID to the profile that we're referencing, because that's what we need. So use that profile reference.record ID to call another fetch on the public cloud database using our profile record ID to get that profile. Check for the errors. Again, we'll handle that later. Cool. We have our profile record. We're going to convert our profile record into a profile, again, just to make this clean here. And then we're going to update our UI with all this stuff from our profile. And because it's Swift UI and these are, you know, state variables, once we update these, the UI will redraw and we should see our information. Now, what we're not going to see is, you know, we should see like a loading spinner, right? We're making 3 network calls here. Imagine if you're on a slow network, you know, it's going to take a little bit for your actual info to show up. So yes, in the future, we will have a loading screen. And even more in the future, we're not going to be making 3 network calls because we will, you know, save some of this data so we're not constantly having to get it. But again, step by step so you can see the process, then we refactor. Okay, so let's run this and see if it works. And I haven't had a great day when it comes to running the project and it working on the first time. Let's see if, you know, third time's a charm here. Okay, here we are. Let's go to our profile. There we go. Okay, you see how it took a second to pop in? Again, we'll put up a loading screen or something like that to handle that. But our data is downloaded and populated. And we did comment out create profile, so nothing happens there. But if you didn't comment it out and you were hitting this, you know, you would be creating profiles left and right. You don't want to do that. And of course, we have to handle different context, right? Because if I already have a profile and this happens, I don't want this button to say create profile. And I don't want the action on this button to create a profile, right? We need to have a separate update profile, you know, function, right, to change the title and all that stuff. So there's plenty of UI stuff we have to do in a little bit. But again, I just wanted to, hey, can we create a profile and get it up on CloudKit? Cool. Once we have it up on CloudKit, can we retrieve it and show it on our screen? Cool. That was the goal for now. Over the next couple of videos, we're going to refactor and clean up this profile screen so we do handle all of those cases.